Last night, Lisa and I went to the Core Club on 56th Street. I think it's kind of like the Soho Club, but for older people, certainly. But it was very interesting. Our neighbor here in the building invited us over to hear a talk by Jonathan Taplin. Taplin is a fascinating character in and of himself. He's the director of the Annenberg Innovation Lab, or director emeritus of the Annenberg Innovation Lab at USC, but he was also a former tour manager for Bob Dylan and the band. You don't get that kind of combination very often. He's also produced movies including Martin Scorsese's Mean Streets. So the guy knows the media business, and he's been around. He's very, very smart. And he did a presentation. He was interviewed by Jeffrey Toobin from The New Yorker, used to be with New York Magazine, and it was an absolutely fascinating evening. The topic of discussion was how Google and Amazon and Facebook have essentially monopolized the entire world of content and media on the internet. And of course it went on for an hour. And then I was so intrigued with the thing, I bought his book, which you'll see backward, but you should buy forward. And he even autographed it for Lisa, so we stood online and there's the autograph. There it is. Lisa, even though he doesn't know her, sat and autographed. So the guy's a nice guy anyway, but what he had to say was absolutely fascinating. And I don't want to compress the whole, I can't compress the whole thing. I urge you to read the book. I've started reading it myself, and when I finish it, I'll have a much more in-depth analysis. But our concern here, our interest here, is the impact that Facebook, where actually I'm appearing now, and Amazon, where all of us buy pretty much everything, and Google, which owns like the whole world, have, because effectively they've monopolized the world of media and the world of content, and this is a very dangerous thing. I mean, he points it out, but to me, the interesting thing here was the rapidity of the transformation, and he put up a lot of slides in the thing, and the most interesting slide was one that showed the top 5 corporations in the world based on market cap in the year 2000, and they were like Exxon and General Motors and Ford and stuff like that. And then he showed the top 5 corporations in the world today based on market cap in the year 2017, and they are Apple, Microsoft, Facebook. It was absolutely astonishing, except for ExxonMobil, which is number 5 and apparently soon to be squashed down to number 6, and IBM is coming up behind. They're all content, internet, information businesses. This is a radical, almost mind-boggling transformation in the very construct of the economy and the way the world operates. This is really something to pay attention to. And I don't think we've seen this kind of transformation in the world in any way, probably since the Industrial Revolution introduced steam engines and railroad to Britain, essentially, and then the rest of the world 200 years ago, and that didn't take place in a 15-year period. So the thing has gone like that. And the core, I mean, he talks about a lot of stuff. One of the interesting things that he predicted, and I guess it was true because it was in the New York Times today, was that Snapchat, which had this enormous valuation, essentially had this idea of putting, funny stuff on pictures, which I don't really get myself, but apparently Brett gets it because it's his generation. Anyway, Snapchat is totally screwed now because yesterday Facebook announced they were going to do all that stuff anyway. So this morning, Snapchat stock collapsed, sorry to tell you, and it's probably headed for the toilet. Brett, I think you should sell while you still can, because essentially the company has got nothing. They're kind of like, these 3 companies do this all the time. You may remember Periscope, which was also online live streaming, which is what we're doing now. That also has no value whatsoever. Meerkat before that, same thing. So these 3 big companies essentially come along, and because they have so much spread, they have a billion users, they have enormous revenue streams, they can basically do anything they want. And the discussion last night was whether it's possible to even indulge in the idea of antitrust suits, which is of course what Teddy Roosevelt did to the giant trusts, the sugar trust and the copper trust and all that at the turn of the 20th century. The problem is we don't have Teddy Roosevelt in the White House, we have Donald Trump in the White House, and he is not going to get involved in any antitrust thing. He's too busy restoring coal mines and the coal industry. So, yes, move on away from political things, because we don't want to alienate any of our members who happen to be Trump lovers, right? Fine. Okay. The takeaway to me is that if you don't pay attention to the technology, you are going to be in very serious trouble. Next week, I think it's next week or the week after, I'm giving a talk in Galway, Ireland. I urge you to come. It's a lovely town anyway. And I was kind of working on the talk today. And the essence of the question in the talk, and we're going to talk about this tomorrow because Steve Ross asked this question specifically, and I want to address it, is how do journalists make a living? So the question that was put before me as one of the speakers is journalism dead? And I made the PowerPoint thing today, and my first slide just says yes, because journalism, conventional journalism, is definitely dead, and it's all part of the stuff that Taplin talks about. I mean, Taplin was in the music business, and he talks about how music content creators got squashed down to no revenue. The numbers he gives are just astonishing. Apparently on Spotify you get 0.0001%. He said you get 1 million hits, streams on Spotify and you get $40. I mean, the numbers are just pornographic from the sense of terrible. But the point here is that as we are all content creators, that's what we're doing with our iPhones and our video cameras and stuff like that. And if there's no revenue, if you're not making any money, then all your content creation is for naught. So the question becomes, how do we adapt ourselves to this new world of live streaming, online? It's clearly dominated by Facebook and Google, and these things are not going away, and there's not going to be a massive antitrust action, at least in the near future. But all of us have to earn a living, and we have to make money out of the videos that we make. Otherwise, we are wasting our time. We're going to deal with this a lot more tomorrow because I want to address this, but I want to raise the question today. The first step in making video content profitable, there's several steps, but the very first step in making video content profitable is that you have to cut the cost of production. If you are making video and it's costing you thousands of dollars per minute to make the stuff, you are never, very few people. I mean, Taylor Swift makes millions out of live stream, but nobody else does. That's what he said yesterday. He said there are like 10 people who make Kanye West and stuff like that.
Sponsorship deals.
Well, because of sponsorship deals and stuff like that. But the vast 99% of musicians are getting crushed by this thing, and this crushing machine is coming to television and video very quickly. So there's going to be a restructuring of the entire television and video and online media industry. And our mission here, our quandary, or the thing we have to solve, and I think it is very solvable, is how do those of us who make video content actually make a living out of this thing? It's entirely possible. There are millions of screens that have to be filled every day. The process of making, the cost of making content has been reduced to next to nothing, as we're doing here. This notion of live streaming out online 10 years ago would have involved having a satellite and a satellite link and a network and a studio and lights and all that stuff. And I'm just sitting here in the office talking to you, but going out to about 5 billion potential, not real, but potential viewers, and of course it lives online forever. So there is an architecture here that has been rewritten. The traditional architecture of television and video was it was very expensive to make. You made it once. It was made by a broadcast by a network, and it went out to millions of people, and then advertisers paid for the privilege of their eyeballs. That model is effectively dying and dead. And a new model is being born, just like the arrival of the steam engine, a whole new model with Arkwright, a whole new factory model of manufacturing and revenue was born. It didn't necessarily mean the end of everyone's income, but it did mean that the people who were, farmers, and 85% of the population used to be involved in agriculture, now it's only 3%. So we are at the beginning, it's not the very beginning, but we're certainly in the early stages of a massive, massive revolution in terms of content. Now, I mean, newspapers are already screwed, but now it's coming into the world of television and video. And it is incumbent upon us to figure out, and for us, we the content makers, have to take control of this thing. I mean, that's maybe the biggest takeaway here, is that once we cede control of this to the techies who make the websites, then we're finished. And it's kind of a tragedy because the internet actually happened to our business. Content creators are the sole, without content, there is no internet. And so the question now becomes, how do we as content makers maintain control over our product? How do we make it in a profitable way? And how do we own the product at the end of the day? And this is what we're going to be dealing with tomorrow and for several days after that, as well as some pieces I'm going to put up on VJ World. So I urge you to go and take a look at the VJ.com. The VJ.com, it's more than a training site, although it's a training site. It's really the nexus of content creators getting together and working together to figure out how to reinvent ourselves for this new world. I also urge you to get a hold of Taplin's book, Move Fast and Break Things. This is Mark Zuckerberg's, the title comes from something Zuckerberg said to his people, and they do. They break a lot of stuff, but they're not going to break us. So that's it for today. If you have questions, you can always get us at contact@thevj.com. Visit the VJ.com website, join up, become a member of this movement, as well as learn how to make better video on your own, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for joining us.